Okay, it's 4 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and call to order the July 20th, 2015 meeting of the Salina City Commission. We'll have a roll call, please.
Mayor Blanchard.
Here.
Commissioner Crawford.
Here.
Commissioner Davis.
Here.
Commissioner Hardy.
Here.
Commissioner Ryan.
Okay, at this time I would ask that all of those present who can and are able to please stand and join in the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, looking at our agenda today, we have no awards and proclamations, so we'll move on to the Citizens Forum. And this is an opportunity for anyone to come up and speak regarding an item that is not on the agenda today. And we'll just make sure that when you step to the microphone, you speak clearly and give your name and address. And please limit your comments to 5 minutes or less. If it's longer, we can deal with that. But also, if we could just speak to the commission and address the commission with your questions and answers, and we'll get you answers, but we won't necessarily take action. So, having said all of that, if we have any citizens that wish to come forward at this time, we welcome you. Okay.
Okay. Good afternoon, Commissioners.
Good afternoon.
Ray Ruska, 235 North Santa Fe. I had one question here, and it's for you, Mr. Mayor, Chairman. Have you ever given John Price a written apology?
Mr. Haruska, this is not question and answer session. If you have comments, I ask you to please make your
The
comments.
comment
Make
would
them
be,
brief.
have you ever given John Price a written apology? Are you afraid to answer that question?
No, this is not the appropriate forum
Yes,
for
it is
whatever.
appropriate. How do you get to that point unless it's here?
It's not, sir. I would ask you that you make your comments and then please return to your seat.
Okay, I'm going to take that as a yes. Thank you.
You're welcome. Next, please.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Brian Richardson, 361 North Holmes Road. 3 years and 4 months ago, we first presented to this government body the opportunity and the idea of a downtown Salina rec center. Since that time frame, the title has changed to the Field House to more represent the desired multi-use facility. In 2013, you, the City Commission, challenged our team to up our game from the $3 million that we had offered to raise to an unprecedented amount for a public-private partnership in Salina, Kansas, to $4.5 million. I'm proud to stand in front of you today as the Salina community has responded. Today we are excited to share with you that the community has raised the $4.5 million. I stand with an extended hand to you, our new partners, the City of Salina, as we are ready for the new field house. As exciting as this project is in its own right, we are also excited that this will serve as the Kickstarter for a possible additional $30 million in downtown projects. I want to thank City staff, Jason, Mike, Dion, for all of their diligence behind the scenes to make this reality. Commissioners, this is a great start to a new partnership that will continue to elevate Salina, Kansas to one of the best communities to work, live, and play in. For that, we say thanks.
Well, thank you very much.
You bet.
Have you got time for a few comments from us?
Absolutely. Be glad to.
Would anybody like to share anything with Brian? Because I will. Okay, having not. Well, that's exciting news, and we not only thank you, but we encourage you to keep going strong because, as you mentioned, it is a kickstart to great things happening downtown. Also, thank you for acknowledging staff because we, too, know that staff has been very diligent in working through this process and will continue to do so, and especially to Dion, who you worked with quite closely.
Absolutely.
I actually had an opportunity to go on the radio last week to talk a little. They asked me about the field house project, and I'll tell you what I told them, is that you've been a great quarterback in this project. You have taken the lead, and you've gone out and have done it, and it is unprecedented. We did challenge you to get that 50%, get us to halfway, and we're happy and excited that you were able to do that.
Thank you.
So great work. We look forward to working forward. As you know, we're working with the architect and going through the building process now. So congratulations to you and to the rest of the community for a job well done, and we look forward to moving forward.
Sounds good. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
You bet.
Okay. Any further citizen comments at this time? And seeing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda.
Item 6.1, approve the minutes of July 13, 2015. Item 6.2, resolution number 15-7264, providing for the adoption of a disclosure compliance procedure relating to the financial obligations issued and to be issued by the City of Salina, Kansas. Item 6.3, authorize the purchase and installation of a telecom infrastructure system from Gateway Wireless and Network Services, LC, at the Salina Bicentennial Center in the amount of $34,275. Item 6.4, resolution number 15-7263, authorizing the city manager to execute a 3.5-year agricultural lease agreement with Madison and Son Farms, LLC, for the North Marymount Road tracks 1 through 4 city agricultural property at a 51.5% cost revenue share. Item 6.5, resolution number 15-7262, authorizing the city manager to execute a 5-year agricultural lease agreement with Galen G. Swenson and Dennis D. Swenson for the agricultural portion of the landfill property at a 42% cost revenue share.
Okay, thank you. Is there any item that any commissioner would like to remove or amend from the consent agenda?
Item 6.3, just for a question.
Okay. Anything further? Okay, go ahead and accept the motion to accept the consent agenda as amended.
I move we approve the consent agenda items 6.1, 6.2, 6.4, and 6.5.
Okay, a motion and a second to accept the consent agenda items 6.1, 6.2, 6.4, and 6.5. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? That passes 5-0. We'll hear item 6.3. And I'll get to that. Oh, looks like it's Dion. Mr. Louthan, please.
I just have a simple question. For the customer who comes to the Buy Center, is there, and I've had times where the internet service is not that great just for whatever I needed to use it for. Will this system be available at all for just the sports fan in there who needs to get on internet, or is this only for employees and vendors?
Great question. It would be very limited for the public. It would be mainly for the clients that would rent the facility, and then the staff that were operating the facility, or a tenant who would come in and be operating for an event. Just from a bandwidth perspective and a cost perspective, that's really all we could afford. It got very, very pricey if we needed to get the pipe, quote unquote, that much bigger to be able to accommodate for a great deal of public use.
Okay, so are there any hotspot areas in the building, or is just luck of the draw where the person just happens to be, or when they're trying to use it?
I may turn to Ron and see what his thoughts are on that. But
it kind of makes a difference of being able to go to a game and be on call, or not go to a game and be on call.
Understood. Every event's going to be a little bit different, so the way that the internet is used will clearly define the availability for the general public to utilize it. So, if we're utilizing if it's a trade show style event, all of our vendors on the floor, we would give them priority as well as the show to utilize that service, and the remaining availability would be out there, but that quantity would be limited depending on the size of the show and the magnitude. No different than if we're streaming video or doing something that would eat up a bulk of that. If it's an event that doesn't have those kind of high level needs, then there should be more available. But it'll be tough to really say, on any given term, what would be available and what wouldn't for general public use. So we wanted to be very upfront about that and just say, hey, we're going to meet the needs of our clients today, understanding that, in years to come, there could be needs that we aren't even familiar with at the moment, but this meets and exceeds all of those needs today and helps us have a little wiggle room for future as well.
Ron, just to follow up to that, are you saying then that this system or the bandwidth is unlocked, would be unlocked, it's just limited bandwidth, or would it typically not be unlocked for the general public?
Typically, it would not be unlocked.
Okay.
It would be all password protected. That way, when we give it out to said client or vendor, it is secure, meaning that they don't have other people kind of pinging against it, which would drain their signal ability down, which is some of the issues that we currently have. Somebody will be fine in the middle of the day, and then as soon as we open up the building and start putting people in there, they don't understand what's happening. It's because there's no password protection ability to kind of control that that this system would allow. So we would primarily have it locked, but again, it would depend upon the event's needs. If the event, by chance, had limited or no needs, then we could kind of play with that as needed on a case-by-case basis.
Have you guys had any discussion about the possible need for open Wi-Fi? And if so, what kind of cost to benefit would you expect to have, or if you've had a chance to look at that?
I don't know that I can speak to the cost. I know that the issue with bringing the infrastructure to the facility is fairly substantial, as that service isn't there now. So that's really the bulk of the cost, which is substantial, to say the least. I mean, you might be able to speak to it better than me with what was done at Kenwood Cove or whatnot. But as of today, we would have the highest level of service that the current infrastructure coming to the building would provide.
Yeah, and my second question was going to be the one City Manager just asked. But
one thing we could do, Commissioners, if you as a group believe that having unlocked Wi-Fi just for the typical customer in the stands is important to you, we could look at that. We don't know at this point if there will be any remaining funds left from the project for something like that or for any other uses, but if there are remaining funds, certainly we'll be looking at potential uses, and we could see what the capital cost would be potentially, and if there's an operating cost, which I expect there will be, and what that might be. So we could take a peek at that if you like, if you feel it's important enough. If not, we certainly wouldn't do that, but it's really up to your direction.
oh, I'd like you to at least take a look at it. I'm not obligated any money, but just
This is a three-year
for fun's sake.
contract.
Yeah, and I don't even know it
Service
could
side.
necessarily have to be part of this. I think, let's see. Need to look, I don't want to make a mistake on the answer. This is a 3-year.
Well, we were just discussing that right here. I'll have to pull it out and look real quick.
Like I said, depending on the need for confidentiality of the type of information, which I don't know what that is for the information that we pass through this bandwidth, it's a possibility it could be a totally separate system just for public use, but I think wouldn't take asking that type of question to a couple of people and find out real quick what would be needed to do that, whether it needs to be separate or not, and what the possible cost range might be, and operating cost range.
Thank you. That was it.
Were you able to find an answer to Commissioner Ryan's question?
Quickly on that. Yeah. This is just with the provider of the infrastructure. The contract itself for the service would be with, I believe, Cox is.
Okay.
So it would be an operating expense for that end of it. And I know they did look at some of that, and I don't want to overspeak here, but they did look at some of the expanded packages, and the cost per month got really, really pricey too, not just to get the service there, but to have the bandwidth, if you had the service, to be able to provide that on a monthly basis. And I don't remember what it was, but it was fairly significant on a monthly basis too.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, we have any public comment on this item? Seeing none, bring it back for action.
Mr. Mayor, move approval of purchase and installation of a telecom infrastructure system from Gateway Wireless and Network Services, LC, at the Salina Bicentennial Center in the amount of $34,275.
Second.
Okay, a motion and a second to authorize the purchase and installation of a telecom infrastructure system for Gateway Wireless and Network Services, LC, at the Salina Bicentennial Center in the amount of $34,275. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. Move on to administration.
Item 7.1, first reading ordinance number 15-10787, repealing Salina Code Section 35-104 and amending Salina Code Sections 8-12.4.2, 8-49.1, 14-49.5.1, 31-103.4, and 35-106, all pertaining to address numbers and repealing existing sections.
Okay, this will be a staff report from Mike Scragg.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. I believe this is mostly a housekeeping item, so I'll keep my comments brief, and you're certainly welcome to ask detailed questions if you like. As I indicated in the report, address numbering seems like a pretty easy topic, but a thorough review of our codes finds that it's addressed 7 different places in our codes, and there's inconsistencies among those references. As you may know, we adopt the International Building Code as a predetermined publication in its entirety to make local amendments. Similarly, we do the International Residential Code the same way as well as the International Fire Code, and our Chapter 31 is an adoption of the International Property Maintenance Code. So there's 4 instances of an international code family that all have conflicting comments related to address numbering, and then 3 more instances within our own Chapter 35. So the 2012 edition of the International Code family does a better job of kind of consolidating the topic, and we use that as a starting point, the International Fire Code provisions from the 2012 edition. So beginning at the top of the second page of my staff report is a red line paragraph that is the International Fire Code provisions with a couple of additions and deletions. For clarity purposes, we added in a reference to Arabic numbering. I don't know that we've ever had anyone try to use a binary system or some other numbering system, but we wanted to be sure about that. And then we also struck the reference to letters. As I indicated, from the emergency response standpoint, there are instances where people have the number spelled out in letters, and that's difficult as you're passing by in an emergency response to identify. And then we struck a reference to access by means of a private roadway to broaden the application of requiring an alternate location for addresses if they're not able to be seen. So with those 3 amendments, we've basically adopted the 2012 IFC provisions. The other thing that I would call to your attention that's not part of this but is just a notation is there are some communities that have gone further and taken into account the distance that a building is from the primary road that emergency response would be provided. The example that I gave you is take Coles on South 9th Street. Planet Avenue, the frontage road, Planet Avenue, would be the public street, but it's very likely that emergency response will be trying to pick up those addresses as they're traveling down 9th Street, and it might be useful. 4-inch lettering would probably not be legible from 9th Street. One approach would be to account for that and create some graduated scale based on your distance. That is not part of this ordinance, but if you wish to entertain that, staff would be happy to conduct additional research and report back to you. So the ordinance that you have before you amends all 7 of those different sections to synchronize the language and the cross-references such that the new requirement would be 4-inch lettering, Arabic, no written lettering, 4 inches high, a half-inch wide, installed on a contrasting background required of existing and new residential and commercial structures, with an added requirement that when required by the fire code official, address numbers shall be provided in additional locations when the building address cannot be viewed from the public way. So that's it in a nutshell. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Fire Marshal Williams is here to answer more specific questions as it relates to emergency response or what they may encounter in the field.
Okay.
Question. If, let's say on South 9th Street, if the business name is on 9th Street and a large billboard, if the address number was written on that billboard, would that suffice? Make for a busy board. But
Right. Well, I think there's a couple things going on, and Fire Marshal Williams may be able to speak to it better than me, but in terms of an emergency response, they may not always get the name of the business, so, you know, the 911 call may not identify the business location they're responding to, and I think there's some expectation of consistency in terms of where you're going to find the street address rather than reading the commercial sign and then reading the front of a building, alternating as you go down the roadway. They're looking for some consistency, I believe. So I think the emergency response preference would be knowing that it's placed legibly, visibly on the face of the building as they're traveling down the public way.
As I was reading the report too, that one section that really stuck out to me was having some sort of graduated system for street numbering, because I think it would be a public safety issue as well, because I know that sometimes I'm straining to see what numbers are on buildings as I'm trying to drive and seeing if I'm close to where I really want to be. And if the numbers were a foot high instead of 4 inches high for the business on Planet, it would be much simpler to identify how close I was to where I wanted to be.
I certainly share that personal experience. It's all I can do to get down the roadway and pick out addresses as I'm traveling by at a normal rate of speed, let alone emergency response.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners. If I could tie into that as well, some communities in rural settings have also incorporated reflective numbers. Again, as you approach the area, it allows for our lights or our spotlights on our apparatus, again, to bring that address number a little bit more into detail. And as Mr. Scraggs said, depending on how far it's set back from the roadway, we would like the opportunity to increase that size to where it does make it a little more legible for us when we have to respond. And it is rather challenging when we go through residential subdivisions at night with the script itself, you know, the 1,254. It's really hard to, you know, hopefully you can capture that address before you get to there, and we typically run out our blocks, our 100 blocks, to where we actually we get pretty close, but oftentimes we don't get the opportunity, especially on commercial businesses, to know exactly that this is Kohl's or Walmart or whatever. I mean, we know where the major ones are in the general intersections, but there are circumstances where there are even suite numbers. Some of the Elmore Center, for example, those are addressed with one address and they have individual suite numbers. So that would be another thing we'd want to capture, as well as increase the size of, and even getting some of them posted is even more challenging sometimes, getting to put the suite numbers on there for us.
So the ordinance that's before you today doesn't have the graduated scale accounted for. It is just standardizing the language as it relates to addressing requirements. And then if you are interested in considering the graduated scale approach, you could instruct staff to research that and bring that back to you for further consideration.
it would be a separate action from the ordinance.
Yes.
Question for you on the ordinance is that this is in full force and effect, just like any other ordinance following the publication and yada, yada, yada. So what is the typical homeowner who has 2.5-inch lettering or whatever, and they're supposed to be 4, and it's not on they're white letters on a white painted wall instead of contrasting. What, as far as what they need to know and the best place for them to put that number for emergency response, do we have any way to get the message out to them? That, I mean, how do we plan to do that?
Right.
And part 2 of that question is what does enforcement of this look like?
I'll let Mike handle part 2.
Okay.
I don't want to take it all. Part 1 is probably one of the better ways we can inform the public, though there'll be a little news coverage probably, but I think we can use our utility bill stuffers that go to all the residences for this and remind them of the change. And we're not there to figure out ways or find ways to cite people, so our objective is simply to get the numbers changed over at some point. So people wouldn't be expecting that if we see that it's not the size in the ordinance that we're going to cite them, but we would say, hey, the code now says this, we'd like you to get those replaced, so that ensures that we're going to respond to emergency. If you have one at your location. So that's how we would handle it. It's pretty light-handed, but I think we could get a lot of eyes on it by sending something in the stuffer.
Okay,
As a
and then,
stuffer.
because one thing too is, I mean, I know we do it with storage sheds and fences and so on. We give guidelines on where they should go. Will we give guidelines on they should go above the garage, or?
Yeah,
I
we'll
mean, do we-
be more active, obviously, with new development. You know, anything that goes through our DRT process is a lot easier for that, and it's a trivial piece for them. It's not a big deal. But we'll definitely be more active with that because it's right in front of us at the time. Okay. Otherwise, it may be things that these guys, both police and fire, have eyes you know, that are out there all the time that the rest of us don't have, and so we'll rely on them to see and then make nice, courteous contacts with folks to have them get those changed out as they can.
Okay, because I do know, do you currently advise people on that when you do? I know there's an annual smoke alarm, smoke detector program that the Red Cross, I think, does in conjunction with, sometimes with the fire department.
Correct. Right now, what we do is our main emphasis, as the city manager said, is on commercial, because that's where we actually get to see it. There are instances where we may respond to an address and we may be challenged with trying to find that exact house, and we do notice that there is an addressing issue. We obviously won't bring it up at that point during the emergency situation, but we may go back and follow up and say, you know, really would have helped us out if you'd have had addressing, because there are houses, believe it or not, that don't have addressing at all on their houses.
Right.
So, you know, we'll go back and say, you know, it is important for us as well as you to have the addressing on your house, and then we'll give them some guidance as far as the size, and we've been using that, the fire code, as our reference tool, because for us it just seemed to work that way.
Okay.
I would add, too, that we definitely would approach it from a life safety or an emergency response perspective, and it wouldn't be so much of an enforcement issue. And as it currently stands, our code does make it a responsibility on both commercial and residential properties to display the address. So it's not as if we're changing that aspect and dealing with a retroactive enactment. It's more a case of just education and pointing out that it's in their own best interest.
Okay.
I know at one point we had, in our history, we had people that would come by and offer to paint the numbers on your curb. And to me, that would be a quick and easy solution to have everything more standardized, where the number was on the curb in the middle of where your house was. And so fire, police would know exactly where to look for the numbers going down the street.
A portion of Chapter 35 that still would remain on the books that I didn't address as part of this report is the ability to paint your curb and licensing of and contractors that do that. So that would still be an option, but it wouldn't be required.
Right. Well, I'm thinking that'd be an easy way to make people or have people comply.
Right.
Could add $5 to their water bill or something for that service, perhaps. I don't know.
At the moment, we allow it, but we don't require it.
Okay. Further questions? No? Public comment on this item?
Ray Ruska, 235 North Santa Fe. Mr. Hardy, that was a good suggestion about, you know, painting the curbs. But what happens when it snows? You can't see the curb.
Well, that's good. That's good.
So that's just one point I'd like to make. Thank you.
Sorry. 2 more weeks with this. Judy Larson, 715 North 9th. I live in the Hawthorne Apartments, and I don't know if this is an issue of the development when they were built or what, but the apartments are 2 stories, and the apartment numbers on the first floor seem to be pretty sequential, so they're easy to find. Second floor is another issue. To me, there's no rhyme or reason to the numbering sequence on the second floor. And I don't know if this is something that can be checked into or what, but it seems to me to be a safety hazard and an issue that needs to be addressed on some level. Also, my apartment faces east, but there's another set of apartments that face west, and their numbering is also confusing.
Right.
So if we could, like, address this on some level, I would appreciate it. But like I said, my apartment is fine, the first floor is fine. When you get beyond that, you're messed up.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, and I think that just for the purposes of this, I think they're more looking at the 715 North, the North 9th address.
At the office.
Well, right, the overall building, so
Yeah.
they know where they're going, and then
The
from that
apartments from
standpoint.
there.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
And I can add to that as well, Mayor. Same thing with Chapel Ridge. You know, the apartments are not very easily identifiable from the road, but each building has a specific placard on the side of the building facing the roadway that shows us, okay, these are the apartment numbers from 100 to 120, for example.
Right.
And then we know that's typically going to be our general block. We may have to walk around the building to find the specific apartment itself. But I did take note of her concern, and we will look into that. Historically, we've left the specific addressing of apartments and tenant spaces up to the property owner or developer, but we'll look into that, and that's something we'll definitely look at for future.
Okay, thank you. Any further public comment? Seeing none, we'll bring it back for discussion and action.
I move that we approve on first reading ordinance number 15-10787, repealing Salina Code Section 35-104 and amending Salina Code Sections 8-12.4.2, 8-49.1, 14-49.5.1, 31-103.4, and 35-106, all pertaining to address numbers and repealing the existing sections.
Second.
Okay. Motion and a second to approve on first reading ordinance number 15-10787 as proposed. Any further discussion? Seeing none. Whoop.
How about the part about the graduated numbering system? Would we want to send that recommendation to staff? I like the idea.
Yeah, I think that doesn't necessarily need to be in this motion, does it?
No, but before the discussion.
Oh, okay. I think we can do that. I think have them look at that and bring that back.
Sorry, Mayor, I was just asking Mr. Scragg if perhaps when we get ready to do the IFC and IBC final presentation for adoption, perhaps at that point we can bring that to you as an additional item as far as the Chapter 5 of the International Building and Fire Code.
Okay, sounds good. Good? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That passes 5-0. We have no development business today, so we'll move on to other business. Do we have any other business?
Do I need to make a motion for executive session?
Yeah.
Well, we have an executive session on the
It's on the agenda.
agenda.
Be clear about
We
that.
have a combination of bases for your executive session. And the executive session will be handled in two phases. But in order just to handle that as seamlessly as possible, maybe we're just going to articulate those phases so that as the motion is made, you know that the first phase will relate to trade secrets and security measures. And then you will transition to a separate discussion that will be legally based for attorney-client privileged communications, as well as discussions related to potential acquisition of real estate. So have that litany of items that we handle in those phases.
Okay.
The thought was that was enable you just to handle it single and not have to come back out two sessions.
From a time perspective, very optimistically would be 60 minutes. Realistically, I think would be closer to 90 minutes.
Total.
Total.
Does that give us a little break?
Yeah, I think so.
90 minutes.
Sure.
Sounds like 9.
And we would not expect it to come back for any action.
Okay, no action following.
If we are finished in 60 minutes instead of 90 minutes, then we are here for 90 minutes?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's part of the reason for trying to be conservative and unrealistic on the initial time frame.
I think I would win on the over-under, but I still
Okay.
recommend you go ahead and go 60.
Defer to your judgment.
Mr. Mayor, I move to recess into executive session for 60 minutes to discuss confidential data relating to the financial affairs and trade secrets of a corporation for the reason that public discussion of the information would competitively disadvantage the corporation, and for matters relating to security measures for the reason that the public discussion would jeopardize the security measures, and reconvene at, let's just make it 5:30, 5:35.
Second. I'm sorry.
You omitted one, the real estate.
Oh, and to discuss with legal counsel matters subject to the attorney-client privilege for the reason that public discussion of those matters would waive the privilege and adversely affect the city's interest in the matters, and to discuss matters pertaining to the acquisition of real estate for the reason that public discussion of the matter would adversely affect the city's position in relation to acquisition of the real estate, and reconvene.
Can we say 5:40? We'll have 5 minutes to.
5:40 p.m.
Okay.
It would be 65 minutes.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second to recess into executive session for 65 minutes for various reasons. And return at
6:40.
5:40 p.m. We're record
5:40.
time.
Ooh, yeah.
Moving
Sorry
along.
about that.
5:40 p.m. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? 5-0. We're in executive session.